Who's hosting this week?
You are. We decided this.
I forgot. Welcome to Crying in the Book Club. We were a podcast about comic books, and we're still a podcast about comic books, but different this time.
That's true.
We're here to talk about Scott Pilgrim.
Did we really throw you off that much by, reminding you that you were the one who was hosting this episode?
No, I just nailed it. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's true.
Well,
there's a recording, so
it would have been. You would have nailed it even more if you said the names of the people. On
Well,
the
I was
podcast.
about to.
Oh, okay.
I'm here with my co-host, Jean-Luc. Hi, Jean-Luc.
Who are you?
I'm gonna tell you.
Oh, okay.
Don't
I'm
backseat
being
host.
polite.
I know you hosted like 284 episodes.
I am introducing my good friends first, and then I will tell you I am.
Fair enough. I'm Jean-Luc. That's me. I'm being really rude this episode. I'm sorry.
And who else am I with?
And I'm Alex.
You gonna do that voice the whole episode?
Yep.
Sounds good. And I am Emily. And we're here to talk about Scott Pilgrim.
We are.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World, specifically.
I just want to say,
I mean, I guess, is that officially the title of the whole...
No, it's... No. I think it is just Scott Pilgrim. I think Scott Pilgrim versus the World is...
That's just the movie and one of the volumes.
It's one of the volumes, yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I love the, we have our snazzy opening, courtesy of Gwen.
Yes.
And it was nice that we're doing the show. We're using video. You're not going to see it. But
no, I'm not recording this video. I had the option, chose not to.
But it was nice. It was nice to groove to the music and see Emily and Jean-Luc. It was like I could see us in a club awkwardly dancing.
We were in that moment. We were truly crying in the book club.
It's true. I don't know how to do any dancing in a club that's not awkward. So it that was probably about what you would see if I went clubbing, or me sitting at the bar drinking. Sadly, telling people I don't drink.
I think Jean-Luc and I would just be sitting at the bar. I can see Alex out there dancing.
Oh, I'll come sit at the bar with you guys.
Yeah, and insist you don't drink.
Yeah, you know who else doesn't drink?
Who?
Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah.
The
legend. The sober legend.
So straight edge king.
You don't see it. Actually, they removed this for the color printing, but he actually does have the black X's tattooed on his hands. In the black and white version, you could see it, but they decided for the color there was just an error for the color printing where they used the fill tool on his arm, and it just all got the flesh tone, and it went over the black X's tattoos that the straight edge Scott Pilgrim has. So
I thought he was edgy. I thought he wasn't edgy, but now I'm like
his X tattoos.
Yeah, his
done?
X yeah, exactly. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I
wasn't going for that, but it is a sort of a nice double entendre.
I want to start with Alex here. You had not read this.
No, I had seen the award-winning movie set in Toronto, starring Michael Cera.
How do you feel about this work as a Canadian?
It's great. It's like you see a lot of places that are now demolished. Like Honest Ed's is there. It gets demolished in the comic too, and it's demolished in real life, which is a nice little.
Okay, I actually have a question, and maybe we should save this, but have you been to Honest Ed's?
Oh yeah.
How accurate is the portrayal of it in the comic?
They got it's huge. It's like a city block, and you never know what you're gonna get, but it's gonna be crap. But it's gonna be cool. It's like it was a wild place. Rip. It's now gonna be condos. So.
Oh, that sucks.
Very sad.
Yeah.
Everything is condos at some point.
Yeah. I hope to someday be
a condo.
Yeah.
It's a Family Tree reboot called Family Condos. Daughter just starts turning into a condo.
Damn. Just leave her.
Honestly, yeah. Don't even bother. That would be really grim. That's like the really dark, much more upsetting version of that comic. But that's not what we're talking about. I should leave the references. Alex, apologize for interrupting.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, like
talking about your first experience with this comic.
I heard great things about Scott Pilgrim as a comic, and I quite like the movie. I've seen it a couple times, and it was like, oh, this is a quirky movie with Michael Cera. I would say the definitive Michael Cera role in my eyes, having not seen Superbad, which I think he's in.
Yes.
Superbad? Yeah.
Yes.
Guy who's only seen one Michael Cera movie.
This is his best performance yet. Above and beyond. I've seen Juno. So,
Oh yeah, he is in Juno.
He is.
Yeah, he plays Juno.
He plays
the titular Juno. Reading Scott Pilgrim, it's interesting that it was released. So was this released in like 6 issues kind of thing? Like 6
volumes.
Issues? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, right. So it was like a manga style, like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it didn't have, as far as I know, and Emily, you can maybe correct me because you probably were more closer to reading it when it came out than I was.
That's not true at all.
Oh, okay.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
But
I believe it never had like an issue to issue release. Like it was released only as the volumes.
Published in Tankobon.
I don't know what that means.
That's what they call when you take issues of a manga and you collect them into a volume. They're called Tankobon.
Gotcha.
Okay.
We call them trades.
Well,
here in America.
You're America.
Trades. And then I read 6 volumes of Scott Pilgrim, and here we are.
Jean-Luc, what about you? This is obviously not your first read. When did you first read it? How old were you?
So I definitely would have read it after I saw the movie, and I definitely read it after it was finished. So it was around the time I got into Questionable Content, the webcomic as well. And I read them like kind of in tandem with one another. Which was, kind of perfect. So I assume based on those benchmarks, I must have been like a junior in high school. So 2013 or so. So probably because it ended in 2012, I think, because it definitely finished after the movie came out. So
yes,
pretty close to when the comic actually finished.
Yeah. The last volume, came out in 2010, I think.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I for some reason I thought that it finished after the movie.
Well, it did. I mean, what happened was the movie finished filming and the finished version of the 6th volume came out after they had finished filming. So they didn't have necessarily
Gotcha,
at least I think so.
No, you're right. I think I'm thinking of the hardcovers, which
the hardcovers came out a couple years later.
The colored versions.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. But definitely after the movie, and I saw the movie first. I saw the movie not when it came out, but only like a year or two after, like probably 2012.
Alex, did you see it in theaters?
No, I saw it on DVD sometime.
Oh wow, okay, so I'm the only one that saw it in theaters.
I didn't see it in theaters either. I
went to the midnight showing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty late.
Before you read the comics, or
yeah, before I read the comic,
awesome.
I had been seeing the commercials. I thought it looked really cool. I had a group of friends that liked comic books, so we were just yeah, let's go to the midnight showing.
Nice.
That's the first Edgar Wright movie I saw as well.
Yeah, this was definitely my first Edgar Wright movie for sure.
And I definitely saw it without knowing it was an Edgar Wright film.
I think I'd seen Hot Fuzz.
I was aware of Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, but I had not seen either of them.
Yeah, I don't remember. I definitely remember that the reason that I watched the movie was because it was on some IGN top 25 comic book movies.
That's very funny.
That, which is when I was in high school, that was how I decided what I was gonna pirate that night to watch over the weekend.
I used to read so much IGN in high school. I know.
I mean, that's the way. That's what it was. And it's funny because I didn't even love the movie. I definitely enjoyed it, but I didn't really love the movie until after I read the comic. For the first time.
I will say I watched the movie today, and it was the first time I had seen it since reading the comic, and I have a much better appreciation for it now than I did.
When did you read the comic for the first time?
Okay, so I saw the movie midnight when it came out, and I
Yeah.
watched it a couple of times like in the years after that, just like with friends or whatever. And then I didn't fully read the comic until probably like 2015.
Oh, okay. Wow. So that's I always assumed, just knowing you, that
No,
you
yeah,
had read Scott Pilgrim forever
and I
ago.
can see why, because it seems like something that, like, if I had, the thing is if I had gotten a hold of this comic as a teen, it would have done incalculable damage. Instead,
Yeah.
just seeing the movie did incalculable damage to me as a person.
Well, I'm telling you, like shotgunning, I think about 1,500 questionable content pages in like the same month period that I read all of Scott Pilgrim, like caused my brain to melt.
Oh,
out
I
of
was
my
so into
17-year-old
we will not get into it, but I was so into questionable content. Maybe book club topic.
That would be fun. It's so long now. Is the
I
problem,
know, but
we could definitely break it up. I think it'd be fun to
I feel
do.
like we could take a chunk of it, but anyway, neither here nor there. Yeah, I just like, I never got around to it. I always really liked the art style. I loved the video game, but like I just didn't get around to it. And then like the color editions came out, and I was like, well, why not? So I've actually never read it in black and white. I've
So
only
am I
read it in
the only one
color.
who's read the black and white editions?
Probably.
Yep.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. That's how I read it first.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the color editions had already come out. And there's some other changes. It's not just there's like some extra content in the colored versions as well. There's like some backup stories.
Mm-hmm.
There's one with Kim that I really like that I don't believe was in the black and white ones.
Mm-hmm.
I think the free comic book day special is included in the color.
Yeah, I remember reading that when I read the first color edition. I actually for this read I got the it's like a full color omnibus that has it all collected in one.
On Comixology.
Yeah, on Comixology.
Yeah,
it didn't
that's
have
what I
any
read
of
too.
the it didn't have any of the bonus material or anything.
Yeah, it doesn't. I had to go to the curse site because I was like,
I thought that was very weird.
So I it's kind of a side story. I had the Twitter icon that was that panel of Kim with her face in her hands for a really long time. And when I started reading Scott Pilgrim again for this reread, I was like, oh, I'm going to change it back. It turns out I deleted the file. So I was like, oh, when I get to that part in the comic, I'll just, screenshot it again and use it. And I just never got to that part in the comic. And I'm like, that's fucked up. So I had to, because it's in one of those like backups. So I had to go onto the curse site to screenshot a pirated version of that.
I technically have like the last 3 volumes of the color edition also on Comixology, but I had read the first 3 because they were available on Unlimited. But then I saw the omnibus and I was like, well, I might as well just like have it all.
Easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was shocked that it didn't have any of the bonus content, but I guess it was.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too.
I think this was a paperback release, so maybe that's why. Like,
could be. It's not the deluxe, the super ultra deluxe edition.
Yeah.
I read it on the curse site, and I also ordered it. But like, I read it and then I ordered it like very soon after that.
Nice.
Off of Amazon.
Yeah, I wish I had my physical copies.
I honestly wish I had a physical copy, but instead I'll just admire my Ramona figure that I've got on my bookcase.
That's pretty good too. Unfortunately, I sent it to my house, so it's not here.
Yeah,
but when I get home, there'll be a nice.
I mean, it looks gorgeous no matter how you read it. I mean, like that's one of the big things about
the art is so good.
I mean, Bryan Lee O'Malley has such at least for Western comics, such a distinctive style that's like borderline chibi, but like not quite all the way there.
It's this really, like, I really loved in the early 2000s, there was a lot of this, like, before anime was really as big of a thing, we had a lot of stuff that was like clearly influenced by anime. So you had like Teen Titans and like Puffy Yumi. Those are a little later than Scott Pilgrim, but like, yeah, like I really loved this like middle era of artists emulating like chibi Japanese anime inspired styles.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty drastic shift from Watchmen a couple of weeks ago. I mean it's funny because
absolutely,
Watchmen, a comic that is like like stylistically, I mean, the art is very like, it looks like what you expect a superhero comic, a traditional comic, American comic book to look like. It is in love with 9-panel grids. I think the only time this Scott Pilgrim uses a 9-panel grid is when Envy calls him for the first time before she comes back to Toronto, and it is used it's employed so brilliantly because it's like, everything else is like, Bryan Lee O'Malley is like messing around with the layouts a lot. Like, there's a lot of full page spreads in Scott Pilgrim that are really gorgeous. There's a lot of like different panel layouts depending on like what the story needs, what he wants to emphasize. And then when Envy calls him and he's in the dark apartment that he shares with Wallace, it's just like 9-panel grids, and it's just so perfect at, I think it's 2 or 3 pages of 9-panel grids, and it is just so perfect at like conveying how boxed in he is in that moment. Like, it is so like, it's exactly the thing we talked about with Watchmen last week, where it creates that like sort of almost like claustrophobic atmosphere, and just like bring it in out of nowhere for that scene is so perfect. It's such a, I mean, and I mean, O'Malley is like really clearly somebody who thinks very deeply about like the structure of his comics. I mean, that flows, like, that's not just in Scott Pilgrim, that's Lost at Sea, Seconds. I mean, even though he doesn't draw Snot Girl, it's a big part of Snot Girl as well.
Yeah.
I haven't read Seconds, but it is getting a movie or series or something. Yeah, I linked an article in our group chat.
They announced the actress for it. I don't remember who it is.
It was Blake Lively is directing. Okay. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, Seconds is really good, but
I have not read it, but I've seen some pages from it just online, and I think, especially after this revisit of Scott Pilgrim, I may just check out Seconds just for funsies.
It almost feels like a spiritual sequel to Scott Pilgrim. I mean, it was written like years later, I think maybe 2015 or 16.
Yeah, so. I remember seeing it like in bookstores when it first came out. Also, it's Blake Lively is making her directorial debut as director of Seconds.
That's cool. Yeah. But yeah, it feels very much like a spiritual successor, not to get too much off Scott Pilgrim. But it's almost like, taking a kind of a similar character to Scott, who is sort of directionless, but envisioning them, a few years down the line when they, more so have their life together, but still, are kind of a hot mess.
Yeah.
As Scott is. That's one of the things that is so like, and this is one of the weird things about reading Scott Pilgrim. And I reread it during the pandemic. I haven't read Scott Pilgrim as many times as I've read Watchmen, but I have read it a lot in my life. It's one of the weird things about reading it as an adult, and specifically as a college, like ever since I graduated from college, is like total 180 on my perspective on it. It was, I remember in high school finding it very aspirational, of like, man, this guy's life rocks. And you get it that like, well, you get on the surface that like, yeah, I mean, he's a mess, and I think that's I don't think that's...
I feel like we need to clarify for the listeners that what just happened is that Alex held up a sign that says Scott sucks.
Yeah.
And
also, we should
Don
say
was
the
reacting
plot of
to it.
Yeah. Okay. We should say the plot of Scott Pilgrim before I get into that.
We're getting a little in the weeds. I have I wrote down some introductory like background notes on Scott Pilgrim that I could read to you if you would like.
I would like well, you don't have to read them to us, but you can read them to us or summarize them
or
whatever
like
background info you think was helpful to frame this.
I mean, like Scott Pilgrim written and drawn almost entirely by Bryan Lee O'Malley. He only got a couple of assistants by like the 6th volume, which I don't know if either of you noticed, but the 6th volume has like slightly more complicated backgrounds than the rest of the series. I'm sorry, Brian, it's really not that noticeable. I appreciate the effort, but it's really just not that noticeable.
The art's so much better in the 6th volume.
But I using assistants is great, good job. But he mostly drawn by this one guy, Bryan Lee O'Malley. He wanted to create a shonen style comic after reading Rumiko Takahashi's Ranma 1/2. If I know the two of you are not as up on your manga and anime. Rumika Takahashi did Inuyasha, and she's had a bunch of other series, but Inuyasha and Ranma 1/2 are like the big ones. Shonen is a genre of Japanese comics aimed at adolescent boys. O'Malley was inspired to create the series and the character of Scott Pilgrim after listening to Canadian band Plumtree's 1998 single Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim was originally published in black and white because it was cheaper than doing color. The ending of the story wasn't developed until work began on volumes 5 and 6, which would not be released until after the film adaptation had concluded production. Do you guys know about this, the original ending of the movie? I didn't know about this until literally today. That the movie was originally going to end with Scott getting back together with Knives, which is like cuckoo bananas. Like, I cannot believe that any movie thought that was a good way to go with that ending. Like, I don't know, we'll get into it. I feel like the whole movie is about, like, the movie spends the whole time being like, it's kind of dumb and fucked up that Scott's dating this high schooler, and then to just like have him get together with her at the end.
But now she's in university.
But in the movie, crucially in the movie, she's not.
She's not in high school?
Yeah, the movie doesn't have the characters really age the same way as the comic does.
Oh, right. Like, yeah,
so she still would have been 17 at the end.
Yeah, so she's not in university at the end.
So it's even more fucked up than...
Yeah, the movie takes place over like maybe like a couple of weeks at most, whereas the comic takes place over like months.
It's like a year.
Yeah, it's at least a year.
Yeah. Well,
for the whole thing.
So it's he starts dating Knives at the basically at the beginning, and she says at the end that they started dating when they met the day she turned 17.
And she was 18, but it wasn't like her 18th birthday, so it was a little
a little bit longer than a year. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I didn't know that about the movie.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like we could talk about the movie.
Well, yeah, I'm sure we can get into that. I just still am kind of not over it.
Suffice to say that Edgar Wright is not like known for writing good female characters.
I have a friend who hates Edgar Wright, so
as evidenced by Last Night in Soho. Not great at writing women. Not the greatest.
Still haven't seen.
I'm trying to think of one woman who's been written well by Mr. Wright.
The Ant-Man's girlfriend. Oh wait, no, he got kicked from that movie. The Wasp. God damn it. There's a movie called Ant-Man and the Wasp. I should remember what
Ant-Man and his girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to the manga influences are super important. I mean, anime influences are super important.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you haven't mentioned Utena yet.
Yeah, it hasn't come up. Scott Pilgrim is Utena for Canadians. I have said this. I will say this. Like, it has... and John, I know that you haven't finished it, but it really... I mean, Utena, but it really has such a similar plot structure to Utena, like, down to, I mean,
it's the same conceit. It's that, like, she has to fight all of the
The council is essentially the evil exes. One of them is a girl. Like there's the big evil guy with a purple color aesthetic, which you didn't get about that. You didn't get that far, but the evil guy with the purple aesthetic, like,
is that Anthony's older brother?
It is. Yeah,
okay. I got to him being introduced, but
yeah, he's the worst.
But yeah, no, I mean, it is very like plot wise, it's very similar. I mean, this is a story like the crux of the story is that you have Scott Pilgrim, who's a total deadbeat. And he falls in love with the Manic Pixie Dream Girl and has to defeat her League of Evil Exes to get with her. Which is it is very similar to the plot of Utena. I mean,
and also there's swords pulling out of chests.
Swords being pulled out of people. I mean, at the end when it's revealed that he has he's keeping all of the girls.
It looks just like the upside down castle.
Just like the upside down castle in Utna.
Yeah.
I mean, there's literally, and I think this is something that was added in the color versions, but
no, it's in the black and white version. It's just easier to see in the color version. The Utna poster.
The Utna poster on Envy's wall.
I feel like I've seen the screen cap of it in black and white before.
Gotcha. Okay, that would make sense. It's just been so long since I've read
you wouldn't have recognized it when you read it the first time, so that makes sense. But yeah,
I mean, I definitely recognized it this time.
It is super noticeable, especially in color.
Yeah. But anyway, to what I was, now that we've sort of, established some of that context, what I was saying before.
What is the plot of Scott Pilgrim, John? Tell me.
Well, the plot of Scott Pilgrim is that, this guy, or the plot of Scott Pilgrim to 16-year-old me was this guy, his life is a mess, and he lives in an apartment with his gay best friend, and they sleep in the same bed, but he spends his entire day walking around with hot girls and not doing anything. And to me, that was like, that seems, is that what being 21 is going to be? Because that's going to be fucking awesome. I'm just going to hang out and have no responsibilities, and hot girls are going to talk to me all the time.
You get to sleep with your best homie. You get to talk to
I'm sleeping with the homies anyway, like it's like, why would I, that's not even a downside for me.
No, it's all right.
I love Wallace.
Wallace is awesome. Wallace Wells, the Scott Pilgrim's gay roommate. A character I'm sure we'll get to, but it is kind of funny reading it now, and it's sort of, I mean, it's obviously very different because it's not aspirational anymore, because I'm turning 25 in 2 weeks, and once you get to that point and you live through the things that Scott's lived, I mean, I graduated from college and then fucked off for 6 to 8 months and kind of I didn't have hot girls that I was hanging out with. But I did the whole working part-time and not having any responsibilities, and then having to get a full-time job and moving into my own place and stuff. And it's man, yeah, once you have that experience behind you, you realize how bad it actually sucks the whole time. It's not actually that cool. I mean, I think if you could do the thing where you never worked a day in your life for your whole life, that'd be cool. But I mean, that is kind of like the ending of Scott Pilgrim, right? Is in the last, volume and a half or 2 volumes, it's reality hits this kid in the face, right? Where he, and that's kind of the way it goes for a lot of people, I think. And he's just been
coasting.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a really relatable experience for me, and I think for a lot of people that you go through high school and college, and it's my college sucked, but it wasn't that bad, I had minimal responsibility at the end of the day, right? I had to pass my classes, but I didn't even have to show up to some of them to do that. It was just you just kind of, and then you graduate, and it's if you're lucky, Scott is clearly lucky, and like I was, you have enough money saved up that you can just sort of hang out for a little while, and there's no pressure to enter the workforce full time.
Or and then it's in Scott's case, often just relying on the kindness and generosity of others.
Yeah, having friends who inexplicably will do anything for him, which I mean is relatable, right? I mean, or maybe not relatable necessarily, but it is understandable. I mean, the thing about Scott at the end of the day is that he is definitely kind of a dirtbag and definitely kind of a scumbag, but and specifically to people that he dates, he's an asshole. But to the rest of his friends, he's detached maybe, but he's charming, and he's the kind of person that you would, you could easily see yourself caring about if you were friends with him.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to see how, even though the envy, it's revealed later on, and this is one of the other great things about it, is that there's so much information that's held back because Scott refuses to confront the reality of his life. And so at the end, you sort of find out that all these things that you've been led to believe were done to him, these great wrongs that were done to him, were really kind of his fault. And I mean, definitely maybe not 100%, like breaking up with Envy, maybe it's not entirely his fault. And, he came out of it hurt too, but Envy is not he's not the sole victim of that,
Mm-hmm.
But you have the whole time, it's all his friends are they all like refer to her as the devil, and they all hate her for I mean the Kim and Wallet, or Kim and, oh god, I'm blanking on the other band member's name. Stephen Stills.
Yes.
They have other reasons maybe to not care for Envy so much, but you're really led to believe by like all of the supporting cast that like she is some horrific person.
Mm-hmm.
But you sort of see how you would get there, right? Like you have a lot of people that are loyal to Scott because he, you know, is like not the worst person. Like he's not the worst person in the world. Like you can make an argument, a compelling argument even, that he's the villain of his own story, but
he gets by on quite a bit by just like being nice and or like inoffensive.
yeah. Inoffensive is probably the best word for it.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you know, like I held up the Scott sucks thing, and you know, I do feel that, but I also feel like he sucks, but that's okay. Like I feel like most people at that age suck.
That's the
like,
thing about
like
Scott Pilgrim. Sorry, I'm not going to interrupt you. I will say my thing.
No.
Yeah,
it's just that like it's such a, like, you know, he's doing his own coming of age thing where he's like trying to figure out responsibility too, and like that's a scary time, and everyone kind of sucks when they're doing that. It feels like so.
Yeah, like that's the thing is like this is such like a like a weird magical story, but at the same time it's also so painfully human, and like it's just about like people and their relationships to one another and how those can be like messy and hard to disentangle, and like sometimes you do things that hurt other people and you don't mean to, but you still did it, and you kind of have to face that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you can't just run away forever. That's what's something that Scott and Ramona are both kind of trying to do the whole series, and they both in their own different ways have to come to realize that that's not something that they can keep. It's just not sustainable.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the things that's so cool about the writing in this story too, is that it starts off very like from I mean, I don't even really want to think it's like a morality perspective or whatever, but it is a very black and white story at the beginning. You know, it's like these are like these could be Marvel.
It's a black and white story, John.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, these could be Marvel characters. You know, these could be like Silver Age Marvel characters who, like, you know, they have like personality, but like. And you know, maybe they have some problems, but really at the end of the day, you know, it's very clear. There's very clear lines in the sand of like good guys and bad guys. You know, it's like it's you know, Scott is a protagonist, therefore he's the good guy, even though he, you know, he sort of does some bad stuff sometimes, but it's not really that bad. And it's clear that the people who are fighting, who he's fighting, are like way worse. And then as the story goes on, and specifically, this is one of the things I think the book does really well, is that you really get a better sense for the interiority of the other characters as it goes on. It becomes sort of, I mean, Scott is always, you know, the perspective character, but the book sort of does become less and less about Scott's character as it goes on, and more about the supporting cast, about, you know, Kim and Ramona and Envy to an extent, and the high school sweetheart who shows up,
Lisa,
and Lisa, yes, and Knives, and to a lesser extent, you know, Steven, who sort of disappears for a lot of the comic. But
I like that even though you don't see much of him, like there is like the explicit acknowledgement that like, yeah, Steven like had his own little like life shit going on, and just, you know, everybody else had their own stuff going on, so he didn't didn't make a big deal out of it.
He spent a lot of time with a gay guy in a bedroom, just the two of them, and you know what, it worked out in the end. But there's, I mean, you really get that sense for the interiority of the other characters in the ways that, like, the ways that like they've been affected by Scott. And really, to your point, I think this is a really critical point that you made, Emily, is that it's about that sort of like social web, right? Like that web of people and how they all, you know, what one person does, it sort of has a pulsating effect that goes out through everybody else that they're friends with and in relationships with, or even like tertiary, like they go to the bars together. or whatever the case may be, and that all sort of plays out and affects everybody in one way or another.
Yeah.
And so through that, you sort of come to and through that is really the lens through which the sort of morality becomes murkier and murkier and murkier, because it becomes clearer and clearer that like the things that Scott and Ramona are doing are like hurting other people, and that other people are being affected by that, and that Scott has been distant from and for always has been distant, always has sort of tried to turn away from his problems. I mean, straight up, right down to like not telling Kim that he's moving, and just like one day he's just gone, and when they're in high school, and it's and then it's the redemption arc. It's a classic redemption story from there too, where you
it's like it's a part of a crucial process of maturing is figuring out the extent to which your actions have an impact on other people, and that's just like a big step that a lot of the characters in this series have to go through.
Yeah, I think a lot of them go from like that, like, hey, you grow up and you're the hero of your own story, and you're kind of like, oh yeah, you know what, everything I do is great, and it's like you start off, you're the hero of your own story, and then you realize that like there's people in your life that are having their own stories too at the same time, and your hero-ness in your own story affects everyone else, right? And that's
not
like
in my
Scott.
life though.
No, you're well, you saying you're not the hero of your story? You don't affect people.
No, I don't know. I am the hero, and I affect
course.
people, but only in good ways.
Only in positive ways. Yeah.
That's the thing I'm always saying about you, Jean-Luc, is that you only ever affect my life in good ways.
Before the show, that's what we were talking about. Even though you guys were on the call before I got on it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that manifests differently for different people, like for Kim, it's realizing you can't cut it in the big city and going back home. And I mean, that's real, right? Like, I mean, I think, when you live a sort of like cosmopolitan, like metropolitan life like that, it's sort of inevitable that people like that who, go to college in a big, I mean, living in DC for a long time, like I know plenty of people like that, who lived there, went to college there, and like, I'm going to be here forever. And then 6 months after they graduate, don't have a job. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, I'm moving back home, and that's like a real thing, right? Like, and that's really what I think makes Scott Pilgrim work, is like you have all of this like set dressing, this like sort of urban fantasy set dressing, which is obviously a very important part of the comic. I mean, I'm not trying to downplay it, but I mean, it is a collection of a lot of very real and recognizable experiences.
I have a question. Did we actually address what Scott Pilgrim is about from a plot perspective?
So there's a guy named Scott, and he falls for this girl Ramona, but in order to be with her, he has to defeat her exes. So
okay,
good luck, Scott. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's right. I just really could not remember because we kept saying we need to say what the plot is.
I don't think we ever did.
I don't think we ever actually. I don't know if we actually made it
was.
there. Okay, well,
or if we say it twice, that's fine.
The second time can always be edited out.
Exactly. And yeah, definitely. Things are definitely getting fixed in post on this show, Emily. That's the thing we're going to do. There are probably some people who may not have read Scott Pilgrim before. Mm-hmm. As unfortunate as that is.
Yeah, I think our big message here is just like, go read Scott Pilgrim. Like, even the things, like, there are plenty of things in this book that I would say maybe don't hold up. Like, and when I say that, I mean mostly like social attitudes about things have changed so drastically in the 20 years or whatever, not 20 years, but
close.
I guess close, but not quite. In the years since Scott Pilgrim came out, like the way that they talk about and deal with, like, for instance, like LGBT people is not always like maybe within I don't know. There were ways that there was some friction when I was reading it, but ultimately, like, Scott Pilgrim is still like really good, and it's one of those things that I kind of on one of my other podcasts, we came up with this term for classifying media called raccoon food, which, have you ever seen like a raccoon take like its food down? Raccoons will take their food over to like a water source and like wash it off before they eat it. And that's kind of how I feel about Scott Pilgrim, is like, I like so much about it that I'm willing to go down to the river and wash off some of the stuff that doesn't always sit as well with me, and enjoy the rest.
Yeah, and I mean, like we've talked about, on our previous podcast, a lot of things that haven't aged well. Like Why the Last Man is the one that comes up, and it's
this
like,
aged much better than Why the Last Man. I'll tell you
yeah,
that.
Like you can get through it, and
it also came out much later.
Yeah, I mean, but not like, yeah, no, I guess it was like 10 or so years later, from maybe not Star, but at least
not that much.
5 years,
like 4 or 5 years.
I was gonna say it was at least 4 or 5.
Yeah, but it's like that similar thing where you're revisiting, and there were some things in the copy I read which still had like a lot of the use of the R word, which I mean is not.
Yeah, actually, I have this written down in my notes somewhere, but there was the omnibus that I read came out in 2019, and they made some edits to the dialogue. I didn't go through because I didn't notice it at first until I saw a screen cap that someone had taken from the previous color edition, and I realized that there was a change in dialogue. But they took out a lot of the use of the R slur. I don't know what other alterations were made because I wasn't tracking it, but I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool.
I mean, it's a nice touch. There's a part of me that really thinks that like a work like this, so much of it is that it is like almost it's a time capsule in a way, and I really think that like preserving, and I'm not like, obviously you can get the old editions, like nobody's burning black and white versions of Scott Pilgrim, but I think that like, I mean, so much of this comic is like rooted in 2005.
Sure.
And it right down to like literally like this, it was written in an era like where not everybody had cell phones and things like that. And I think, in that era, like, you could be as progressive as the next person and use the R slur in every other sentence.
No, I mean, absolutely. Like in that, I mean, around that time, I was also probably still using that because it was very commonplace. I think I understand, like, I did some reading, like, unfortunately on Reddit about the update in this edition, and like, I get where people are coming from about like not wanting to change the work as it already existed, and like the fact that it is the time period in which it is set is so integral to the story, like preserving that as an aspect. At the same time, earnestly, I don't think you lose anything taking out the word.
No, it's not like it's more successful or even like reads better because it has like, a slur that used to be okay in 2005.
And honestly, I feel like most people probably would not even notice that, like, this, like, there wasn't any sort of big to-do about this issue coming out with like any changes or anything. Like, the only people that are finding this out are people that obsessively read Scott Pilgrim and are now reading a new edition. So I don't know. Yeah. I just think it's probably a net good that there's a version that doesn't have that language, because
I can definitely. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was actually just gonna say I agree with you. So I don't know I'm cutting you off to say this, but it's like it's also like it's the other point is like it doesn't want to be a thing where like we're just constantly going back to things and like changing things, like changing the work. But I think this is something that doesn't really affect the actual work. So it's like.
This isn't adding CGI to Star Wars.
No, it's not that. I mean, my point was going to be to sort of both, continue talking about that, and also to sort of circle back to the point that you made about some of the like outdated modes of talking about like queer sexuality and sexuality in general. It was kind of funny going back and reading a couple reviews and interviews that were contemporary with the release of Scott Pilgrim.
I should have done that too.
And I tried to do that. It was harder to do that for Watchmen, but I tried to do that as well. But for this, it was much easier to find, and there's a decent amount of praise for it as being like pretty progressive. Which
absolutely,
which is like, and that's not too. My point here is not that like we should hold it up as like a paragon of like progressive values or, or whatever. But my point is that it is like almost the perfect example to me of things that went from being maybe being viewed in that light to just by nature of progress happening, you kind of see them floating away from that, which
I think
is
of
really
that
interesting.
as the Joss Whedon effect.
Yeah, I mean, this is even way more. I mean, this is even like in terms of how this Scott Pilgrim treats gay characters. Like, it is way better than anything Joss Whedon.
Oh no, I meant just specifically like something that comes across as very progressive at the time it comes out, but ages very quickly just based on the way that language evolves. Like,
absolutely,
yeah. But no,
I think Why the Last Man. Not to go back to that, but I think when it came out, it was like seen as this like, oh wow, that is like. Such a progressive book. And
I don't think people read Why the Last Man that way when it. I'd be curious to know though.
They did. Like I've read a couple articles back. That's back when we were like looking at it, and I was just curious as to like when this was coming out, were people like this is kind of weird, or they're like, you know what, this is really important comic and like what they're saying and what you think, but we're not Why the Last Man references.
I definitely thought of it as like a progressive comic up until I reread it. So, I mean,
I mean, my point is just that it's like, it's super fun to go back and read stuff. Well, for me, as somebody who, like, it doesn't affect me, really, if something is progressive or not.
I find it in this specific instance, it is usually just more comical than it is, like, in any way upsetting. So, like, it's fine.
There is something, though, about, like, those modes of comics that, like, don't really exist anymore. Like, you can't really... And this isn't even to, like, talk about, like social norms or anything, but I mean, a big part of this comic is that, like, it feels so self-contained because, like, it takes place before the iPhone came out. When people have cell phones, it's just flip phones. People don't have, like, this constant access to the internet and this interconnectivity, which is something that, like, frankly, a lot of comics have sort of struggled to integrate this into their storytelling, but in a lot of ways has sort of worked its way into a lot of contemporary storytelling in terms of, like, how much more multicultural and interconnected a lot of stuff is. Whereas this feels very much like you couldn't really have a Scott Pilgrim that works the same way it does today, because Scott Pilgrim in the age of social media is so different, because such a big part of this is that, like, you're hearing things second and third hand. It's like Scott is like showing up at a bar and like being and like at the end and is like, oh yeah, Envy's back in town, stuff like that. It's just like, or you're just like running into somebody, he's running into Lisa at the mall when she like was doing her laundry. Those are the kinds of things that, like, they don't, it's harder for that to happen when you're looking at Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and it's so
also like the whole book, like the fact that it's set in Toronto is like, it's very clear in like the backgrounds and like the love he has for it and the references, and it really becomes a part of the story and everything. But if they did it like 2022 Toronto, I don't know what, like, it's not, there aren't as many iconic places because Toronto's sort of become a bigger city over the years kind of thing, and it's lost that, like, a lot of the places that made it sort of the cool place that he wanted to draw and write about.
And also, like, this is a kind of a small thing, but you get a lot of these, like, I mean, there are a lot of urban fantasy elements in Scott Pilgrim. I mean, literally, like, there's parts where he flies and pulls swords out of people. He gets an extra life,
which I love
at the end
so much.
It's awesome. He fights Nega Scott at one point. Like, there's so much stuff like that is really awesome and a really integral part of the story. But you also get these, like, not constant, but like pretty frequent references to, like, how much crazier it is down in America. Like, Ramona's like, oh, you don't have subspace highways up here? Like, that's a big part of, I mean, that's how they meet, right? Is like she is teleporting through his brain, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's like you get all these allusions to, like, an even more, like, insane which is true. I mean, that is kind of the relationship that Canada and the US have in a lot of ways.
And it's like it's a little different. Like growing up, like when I was early 2000s, the 90s, the divide was honestly, like, bigger with Canada and the US, and now it's sort of like, and growing up I was always like, oh, we're so different than the US, and now it's like we're very similar, but smaller, but like there still are differences, but they've sort of evaporated in the last 20 years, a lot of them. So it's
we both sell weapons to Saudi Arabia. It's,
I'm not proud of it, but do what you gotta do, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that, like, there was an era where to pull a contemporary example where, you know, Roe v. Wade could get overturned in America, and, you know, in Canada wouldn't, you know, maybe you hear about it, maybe you don't. But now it's impossible not to, right? Like, it's, you look at Twitter and that's all you see. You know, you go to Discord server and it's, you know, people are talking about it. Like, it's stuff like that, right? And that is sort of what that sort of,
we're a lot more connected.
It's a lot more interconnected. Yeah, it's a lot more of an interconnected world, and that's which is, I just find it so compelling reading like slice of life stories from, you know, the old times. When even when like I wasn't really aware of that. Like I was like 6 or 7, probably. Yeah. Well, older than that when Scott Pilgrim was coming out, but not by much, you know. Like, and it's so compelling to see. It's so interesting and fun to see the world and in that light, which is totally different. It's really cool. I mean, it's so effortless too. Like the world building is very, you know, Bryan Lee O'Malley just puts stuff in there, and it's like, yeah, I mean, all the characters act like it's normal, and there is some like unreliable narrator stuff. Like there's moments towards the end where it's like where you sort of question, you know, some of the unworldly feats. You know,
that's one of the things that I liked, or that I wish that like one of the failings, I think, of the movie adaptation was that it kind of tried to like shy a little more away from like the intensity of the magical realism of the setting. Like it kind of tried to like have it both ways by like it's normal the way that it is in the comic, but also like characters are like, what, why is this happening?
There's a lot of like soy dialogue like that sort of like observation.
Could you put that in not internet brain poisoned words for me, please?
Translate, please.
Can you translate that to me? I'm not on your level of irony poisoning.
No, I mean, I just what that means is that it's like sort of like that observational. To go back to Whedon, like it's like, oh well, that happened.
Whedon-esque, yeah.
It is that is kind of what it is, right? It's like,
and I mean, that was also like kind of a height of Whedon popularity, so it would make sense that like some of that humor would end up making its way in as like this is will appeal to the kids.
It's actually one of those things that like over the years Scott Pilgrim is obviously, like, the movie was very important to me, and I still really like the movie, but over the years have sort of cooled on it for some of those reasons, and largely because there's a lot of elements of it, like the fantasy, that the comic just does so much better in terms of integrating, you know, like it's like, and it's very rarely solely played for jokes, you know? Like the vegan bassist in the movie is like, it's a gag, right? It's like, you know, Scott gets it in the end by switching the soy coffee and the real milk coffee, you know, and it's like, you know, it's like, oh, haha, lol, like we get it. It's funny joke. But in the comic, it's like there's like 50 or 60 pages of this character being on page, and you really get a sense for like, you know, what being a vegan means in the world of Scott Pilgrim.
In the movie, he's like kind of just a dumbass, and in the book he is like actively like
he's much more malicious,
a douche.
Yeah. Well, but and then at the same time, like the payoff is still extremely funny.
Yeah.
Like
chicken
when the vegan board shows up to like take him away and arrest him because he had sorbet, which is,
I mean, the bit where Envy walks away from the table and is like, gelato's vegan, and like believes that, you know? Like it's fun, like it's still funny and it's still absurd, you know, it still has that quality to it. It's just it feels much more purposeful. It feels like there's much more to it beyond just like, you know, the movie is kind of like a theme park ride in a not to, you know, I mean, typically when people
Jean-Luc hates films,
it's disparaging.
For me, that's a positive. I love theme park rides.
Yeah, me too. Let's go.
It's not necessarily a negative, but it's a lot of like, oh, look at this thing happening. Look at this thing happening. Look, isn't this cool? You know?
Yeah, it's got very frenetic editing.
Yeah, in the comic, it's all a lot more and the pacing wise, like the comic book is still like really kind of breakneck.
It's a fool's errand to try to make any comic series into a movie. I don't know why we have continued to try to do it.
It's very rare that it works. I mean, we've only talked about Watchmen and Scott Pilgrim, and they, you know, both things that have had multiple adaptations. And
it's funny. Like, the next book we're going to talk about also has a film adaptation.
It does. We'll announce that at the end of the episode, I guess.
But yeah, I mean, and I don't want to dwell too much on the
yeah, no,
film
it's
adaptation, but
just that, like, you know what, like the comics as a medium can do things that other things just can't, and trying to emulate that, even if it turns out well, which I think, the Scott Pilgrim movie does a pretty okay job of doing it. It's like
it does a good job condensing the story, right?
It's like read the comic. It's great, and it's also just so easy to read. This one, it just flows so nicely.
Oh my god,
big. It's huge.
I have it written in our notes, but like, how is it that that Scott Pilgrim is literally twice as long as Watchmen, and it is like
it's got to be more than twice, right?
It is
gotta
so
be like
much
4 or 5 times.
No, like, well, because Watchmen is like 500-ish pages, and
actually,
I mean, like that.
Yeah,
I'm going off of the version I have on my in Comixology, and it does have like some bonus material, I think, but like, yeah, it is like 500 pages, and Scott Pilgrim is over 1,000. But like, reading Scott Pilgrim is just, it's easy breezy, beautiful cover girl, baby. Like, it's so like it's so smooth. I read the last 100 pages just laying in bed this morning before I got up. Like, it is just such a, and I think part of it is also like the art style is just so much like Watchmen. You have so many more details that you're looking at in any given like square inch of page, but like Scott Pilgrim uses a lot of like simplified shapes, and like there are less panels per page, and it's just like, it is such, and that's not like, none of that is disparaging, it's just different.
You're not reading the crazy journal of a 1980s QAnon.
You don't have to read. You don't have to read several like written text pages of a man's memoir.
And
like,
it's all conversations, right, in Scott Pilgrim, which is why it's so snappy. It's like back and forth, and like it's just written.
The dialogue is snappy, and the visuals are snappy.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like disparage it in that, like, because
no, like, and
Watchmen
no, not at all.
No, I know that's not. I know that's not what you're saying. I mean, Watchmen has like visually there is so much going on in every panel, and it has like this like great sense of like mise en scène and stuff like that, and establishing the world and all that good stuff. But it's, Scott Pilgrim, even though like there are like some panels that are drawn even simpler than the already like fairly like simple art style, but it's always employed with a like really strong degree of intentionality. Like you get those like really small insert panels where Scott is drawn like with like next to no detail after like just gets brutally owned.
I have one specific panel I have saved on my phone that I screen capped it this morning, and it's one of those where like Scott has just like no detail, and it's just,
but it's
so
always
good.
done to like convey like the mood of his character in the moment, right?
Oh yeah, no, like again, not disparaging. I love it. And then Scott ran away to hide forever, and I'm gonna like hold this up to my camera.
We can put that in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll
really
post this on Twitter when we post the episode. But I love this shit so much. And that's also so anime, or like so manga, rather.
Sure.
I mean, there's even stuff that you would think that like a film adaptation would be able to do well. I mean, things like, lighting and stuff that the comic just does on another level. I mean, the shading in this book is incredible. Like which is like, it's so cool, like that they did a colored version of it for this exact reason. And I mean, there's a lot you can do in black and white. But just like the way that this book uses color, it's wild to think that like that I read this for the first time in black and white. And I still think people should read the black and white version as well if you're able to get a chance to get your hands on it. But there's so much this book that communicates with color, and the tone and mood of sequences and pages, that like these are the kinds of things you would think would be able to be adapted into other mediums, but so frequently they aren't. And I think that's a big part of that, is just like when it is such a singular vision from a smaller group, in this case one creator, but even in the case of other comics, 2 or 3 or 4 creators, like you can do things like that where you can establish things that are thematic and that you pull through, that like when something is lit in a certain way, it means something, and that's what it means throughout the whole comic. You know? And it really builds meaning in that way, using a lot of different techniques and stuff like that is just really, really cool.
Yeah, and like compared to like a movie or even like a video game, it's like you can generally, if you're making a graphic novel like Scott Pilgrim, you probably have more time, and if you need to delay it, you can to really like get your vision done or whatever, which is nice. And like a movie or like a video game, you just don't have that because there's so many people involved and everything.
And also there's just so much less real estate, like versus a movie versus a comic. Like the biggest problem with the movie is that it just tries to cram everything in. It's like the movie is such an interesting like case of adaptation because it kind of has all of the right ingredients, and so it should be perfect, but like it just kind of misses the mark even as good as it is. Like it's got like perfect casting, like the editing is really good, the music is really good, like everybody looks the part. Like there are so many scenes that are literally just they use the comic as storyboards, like, and yet it still just does not quite measure up.
No,
I do, over as the years go by, further and further question the Michael Cera casting.
Disagree. I think some of his performance beats were not right there, but like I still think he did good.
I find Scott to be I've always read Scott as a much more charismatic person in the comic. Like he comes across as someone, he's not the kind of person that could become wallpaper in a room, like he is the kind of person where he's
got that grin the whole time. He's got that Scott Pilgrim grin.
Yeah,
he's like
Scott Pilgrim has swag.
I feel like Michael Cera could have done that. I wonder if maybe that's just like a choice in directing, like, because I feel like that there is like he had within him like a more charismatic Scott, and it just was not what happened in this film.
I mean, Michael Cera's like lack of charisma is his charisma, really. Like that's his like acting style, where he's like so uncharismatic. They're kind of like, what's that Michael Cera guy doing? That's pretty cool.
But again, I mean, it's just like Alex, you made some like wavering moves, but Scott Pilgrim does have swag. Like that doesn't make him a good.
Oh no, I was just trying to.
That doesn't make him like a good person, or doesn't excuse anything. Sometimes like smarmy people have swag, and Scott is one of them.
He's got a lot of confidence at the beginning.
He's a little bit of a like he's a little bit of a poor meow meow. Are you guys familiar with this term?
No, but
it does sound like something that would come out of your mouth, though.
Yeah, unfortunately. Poor little meow meow is like it's a Tumblr term, and it's like a character that you like that you love but also think are a little bit pathetic. But that's part of what makes them endearing, is that you kind of feel bad for them. And
he has the confidence but not necessarily like the skill set to back it up, and like but then he like jumps right back up in a way. And that's not.
He has some of the skill set, just never when he like really needs it.
He fights a lot. He
beats up a robot. I mean,
he does 2 robots.
Two robots. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he defeats Scott and gains the power of introspection, or whatever the exact term is.
Someday I'll gain that. That'll be
I think it's the power of understanding.
Understanding. Yeah, I don't need that.
No,
I don't think it's important to me.
We understand you enough.
But I guess not to just belabor the topic of adaptations, but Netflix is supposed to be making a Scott Pilgrim anime style cartoon.
Yeah, I hope they cancel it.
Well, I mean, they did just gut their animation division, and so, but I haven't heard of it getting canceled or anything. I've heard that about several other things, but like
Bone,
this was announced.
The big one.
Bone is the one I would much rather see Bone than Scott Pilgrim.
I don't even want to see Bone. And Bone is a way more like theatrical sort of.
The Scott Pilgrim anime was announced in January of this year, and the news of them like basically decimating their animation department came only like last month.
People don't like watching cartoons.
That was last month, John.
That's the
When this episode comes out, it'll be 2 months ago.
Yeah, well, that's not what I said.
We're in a time limbo. You guys don't know when we're recording this. It's It's all
We're
false.
stuck in a time loop, just like those Taco
Yeah.
Bell commercials I keep seeing.
I mean, like,
Oh my
it
god,
could
those are
be
really
cool.
annoying. Those make me not want to go to Taco Bell.
I do want to
But
try
I
the.
hate-
I do want to try the like hot ranch nacho
Oh, the
fries.
white hot fries burrito. It's so good.
Is it really good?
The black bean white hot nacho fries burrito
my
from
God.
Taco Bell. It's whatever they did with that white hot sauce. It's not. It is spicy. It's not like over the top spicy, and it really tastes like it has like a really good queso taste to it.
I've really been wanting to try it.
You
definitely
you should go.
I will if we record again next week. I will try it between recordings and I'll report
Heck
back.
yeah.
They're
They're sponsored.
Yeah, they're very good.
Taco Bell sponsor us.
DM
Yeah.
Twitter DMs are
We
open.
want to live Moss.
I'm already living Moss. You know, like.
Oh yeah.
But yeah,
Oh, yeah.
okay, so like you guys are not enthused on a Netflix anime.
Like, I think they could do some cool things like art style with the fight scenes and stuff, but it's like everything else doesn't really interest me. And
I have no faith in streaming service first content because it's almost 100% schlock and drivel. That is pumped out to make people watch it for 2 weeks and then forget about it. And I think that for a work that is, especially a work like Scott Pilgrim that is like, you know, so well done and so well considered, it would be a shame for it to get that treatment. I really think like if you're gonna spend $20 or whatever Netflix costs a month, like just buy a volume of Scott Pilgrim once a month, and I guarantee you will have a better experience. I genuinely believe this. Like,
that's fair.
There's a lot in these comics that you can. There's so much in these comics to digest that is, and there's so much depth to them, and so much like artistry to the creation of
I was more so laughing at the idea of like buying the same volume of Scott Pilgrim every month. 30 copies of volume 1.
I mean, you should, if you're going to buy one volume, maybe get 3 or 4. I think those are the strongest ones. But like, what if that's what you want to do? But I just think that, like, I don't know. I don't want to see things that I like, and it doesn't. Not that it takes away from the things that I already like, but I think that it's kind of a
I mean, and at the same time, if it comes out and people watch it and then they're like, hey, I want to check out this comic book, and it gets them to read Scott Pilgrim, it's like, great. You know what? It doesn't hurt me, and more people reading Scott Pilgrim. That's great. I know it doesn't normally work that way. It's not like if it did, then the Marvel comics would be selling like hot except they're not very good. So.
Okay, I'm gonna push back on 2 points. I'm gonna get to what I'm gonna argue with John about in a second. Alex, I think that you see more success with that when it comes to things that are based on like graphic novels or more contained like indie stories. You see a lot more of people actually picking up the comic versions of these. It's when you get with like when you watch like a Marvel movie, you can't just track down the singular comic that was based on.
I'll read the Batman one.
Yeah, like
you go to your store and it's like
you can't really do that with a lot of comic movies, but when it comes to smaller stuff, like it is a lot easier to just go pick that up and see what you're getting into, like Scott Pilgrim. John, I'm gonna push back on the idea that streaming TV is all drivel. Like, I'm not gonna disagree that there is a lot of it that's very bad, but like Netflix, I don't know how this is going to be since they are now like slashing their animation department, but they've put out some like pretty decent animated shows.
Yeah, but my point is that their hit rate is really bad. Like there's definitely highlights. Like I love BoJack, and I know you love things like Centaur World and that the Department of Truth ripoff. That was kind of cute.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not. I don't want to. I guess I shouldn't paint with such a broad brush because I don't want to detract from those things. But the hit rate is somewhere in the realm of 10%. Like I don't want to take a 9 to 1. I don't want to take a 1 in 10 gamble that a Scott Pilgrim adaptation is going to be good.
At the very least, I feel like if it sucks, what's going to happen is that like people are going to talk about it for the maximum week, probably only 3 days after it is released. And if it's bad, like people are just going to stop talking about it and it will go the way of pretty much every other streaming show.
I think that would happen. I think that would happen if it was good. That's
No,
the nature of streaming shows. Is like,
but
people don't talk about them 2 weeks
I mean,
after
that's
they
kind
finish, right? Like,
of my
It's kind of
point, though, is
entertainment in
like,
general,
even
though,
if
yeah.
you don't want it to happen, like, it's probably not going to have any actual impact on you. Like, how much do you think about the Umbrella Academy TV show?
not very much, but I do.
Oh,
Also
I like that one.
like,
Don't get me wrong, but like, you know, how much are you really thinking about it?
I'll watch season 4.
This is such a different topic that is worth talking about. But like, I'm still thinking about the Northmen, you know, and I saw that 2 weeks ago. I'm still thinking about the Batman, which I saw at the beginning of March.
I
you
still
know,
haven't
like,
seen either of those.
there's like, they're both bangers. Like good movies like that, you know, they do have a way of like good entertainment does have a way of staying with.
Oh
staying
no,
with
yeah,
you.
no. I just meant with streaming. That's just sort of how things like move on, you know.
Yeah, and you know, it would suck for Scott Pilgrim to fall into that, because it's such a special comic.
Yeah, at the very least, like, we will always have multiple versions of the
that are
comic.
good. Yeah, absolutely.
I just would be
Absolutely.
I would be interested to see what an animated version would do. I have like written in the doc, like, you know, what do you think they would change and how do you feel about it? I am kind of, you know, I'm hoping that they would keep like the time period, but
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine it would probably be the, you know, if any changes would be like that of the 2019 update, just taking out some of the language that doesn't age well and keeping all the stuff that still works.
Maybe they do like a sequel one, or like, you know, where it starts off and they keep going. I don't know.
I don't think that's
You
gonna
could.
happen.
I mean, you could do that. I think like the ending of Scott Pilgrim is really good. I mean, it's like the moment with him and Ramona going up the elevator, and I mean, obviously there's like the little epilogue where you see where every character is, but like that conversation they have in the elevator at the end is like such a perfect culmination of their character arcs. You know, like them fully realizing like where they've gone wrong, but also still wanting to, you know, give it a shot. It's just really good, and it's really real and really well executed. I think it's just it's such a good ending. So of course there's stories you could tell in the universe afterwards, but I don't know that they would be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know that, like, I would maybe read like a one shot or comic or two about you know, side adventures from a character, but I'm not exactly interested in Scott
Envy
Pilgrim.
should show up in Snot Girl.
I agree.
Snot Girl should just continue, I think.
Snot Girl should just continue.
They should release new issues. Bryan Lee O'Malley and Leslie Hung release an issue of Snot Girl Challenge.
I can't believe that Snot Girl was the best comic of 2021.
It's
2022.
2022. We should start wrapping it up.
Yes, we should.
We have a crucial question though. Which character in Scott Pilgrim cries the most?
Probably Scott. I mean, we see him the most.
I mean, it's Scott or Knives, right? Like,
I've got an off the wall answer for this one. I think.
Okay.
I think it's Wallace. I think
Wallace.
I think Wallace is a character who puts on he puts on this like mask of having everything together and
aloofness.
Having, you know, aloofness and having a really stable life, but like there's really these undercurrents of the whole time he's like kind of pining for people that he's not with, and
he's
you
just
know,
like me for real.
I know, right?
That's why I changed my Twitter name to Lesbian Wallace Wells earlier.
Yeah, which is a good Twitter name. I think there's a lot about Wallace that like you don't see, and I think there are a few moments in the text where you see like, and very briefly see those cracks, like, you know, when Scott sleeps over at his house towards the end, and like he sees him have like a back and forth with Mobile, his psychic boyfriend. You know, I think there's a lot of like that happens off panel with Wallace, and I think Wallace is an awesome character, and you know, obviously one who has a lot of page time, especially early on. But I think Wallace cries more than anybody else. I think Knives is a good answer too, though. Knives definitely, you know, the 17-year-old in the comic probably.
Yeah, like I think by the end of the book, Knives is like her crying levels are normal, but till then.
I think literally in terms of seeing people on panel cry, I think we probably see her cry the most.
Yeah. before we go, real quick, who's everybody's favorite character? That's a question that I want to know the answer to.
I like Kim Pine.
Kim Pine.
I also I developed an even more intense appreciation of Kim Pine. I feel like I could write an entire thesis on the lesbian coding of Kim Pine.
100%.
I like her a lot. I am obviously Ramona Kin, so that's a whole thing that we have to unpack. I'm John, I'm obviously kidding. I mean,
I know.
I love Ramona and I do relate. But the Kin language is obviously kidding.
Of course.
But
yeah. Ramona's a great character.
But yeah, definitely this time reading through, like my appreciation for Kim was much more at the forefront of the experience.
That happened the last time I read it during the pandemic. I was like, oh my god, Kim is, and it's so subtle too, because she's not a character that like has, I mean, she ends by the end she has a lot of page time, but she's not like, the most like on, like she doesn't have like the biggest personality, but she's always around, and you always get the sense that like there's you get just enough interiority.
There's always a little something else going on with Kim.
There's like a little trail of breadcrumbs with Kim leading to the end, like it's every time you get a new one, it's like, it's like when you put your finger in like an empty Doritos bag and you scoop out like a little bit of the dust, and it's like the best part of the whole bag, but it doesn't last very long, and that's like every Kim Pine panel.
Wow.
I'm sure that she would be very I'm sure that she would be very flattered that you compared her to Dorito dust.
I mean, she has red hair. She's a ginger. It works. You can also insert like any snack you like. Like it can be like, when you're eating like a bag of sour Skittles and you get like the sour sugar at the end. It doesn't have to be Doritos.
I just wanted to make fun of you.
I know.
Just kidding. Scott's all our favorite. Scott.
Scott is my poor little meow meow. I just like feel so bad for him, and at the same time recognize that so many of the reasons that I feel bad for him, he is also contributing to.
Yep. But you still feel bad for him.
Yeah. But that's just kind of what being in your 20s is like.
Yeah, it's
very true.
Mm-hmm. As I am about to exit my 20s, having turned 29 this year.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I'm exiting my 20s pretty soon too, if you know what I'm saying.
God! Anyway. I guess it's not the doomsday clock, but are we gonna do a cry space?
Yeah, you heard that sound? That's Sex Bomb.
Yeah, we are Sex Bomb. We're here to make you feel sad and think about death and stuff.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Perfect segue.
What made you guys?
What made you guys cry, either in this comic or just in general?
Who's starting?
I'm hosting, so it's not me.
Okay.
You gotta choose though. No, Jean-Luc's going. Go ahead.
I will choose if you.
No, I'll do it. I'll do something less than serious. So it was, of course, May the 4th, when we recorded this episode, and there were some promotions on, a good old website I like to call shop.lego.com, and I may have spent a lot of money on on with those promotions.
Can we guess how much money you spent?
Ooh, Price is Right rules though.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Alex, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay, I'm gonna guess $200.
Okay, I'm gonna guess because I know a set.
I don't know how much Lego costs. I know they're expensive.
I know what it costs in Canada, so I don't want to go too over, but I'm gonna say $401.
How do Price is Right rules work? You can't go over, right?
You can't go over. I went over, didn't I? Well, I guess I had taxes though.
Okay, well, hold on. What was it?
You just barely went over. It was like $380.
Damn.
So you just
I
just
almost
barely
said
went
300. I didn't want to go over because it was Price is Right rules.
Well, you still won though. 'Cause
I
Alex
know,
did
but I
go
could have
over,
been
so.
closer.
And I sent it to my parents' place because I'm in Colorado for another month, and I didn't really want to like drag stuff around, so I won't be able to build my new sets for probably six to 8 weeks at this point.
That is a good cry space then. Yeah.
I'm sad about that. I haven't
Oh.
built a Lego set in 2 months, and I really would like that to change, but
Yeah.
not anytime soon, unfortunately. The good news
Wow.
is I will have a smile space, I guess, when I get back, because there will be like a big there were already like 3 sets that I'd ordered and sent there, so there will be like a big stack of sets that I will have to build when I go to my parents' place next.
Damn.
So I'm looking forward to that.
That's a nice welcome.
Yeah.
Alex, what's something that made you cry?
I'd say it was a tears of joy this week. That made me cry. My cat's still not alive. I'm still waiting for that to happen. Reference to last week. Real fans know.
Editor's note. Alex's cat died at the end of episode 1.
Listen to it at this link. What's the link, Jean-Luc?
It'll be below. Well, it'll just be below this in the feed.
http://
So yeah,
the RSS isn't generated yet, so I genuinely don't.
Before
know.
the pandemic started, this was after university, and an acquaintance from university put out an Instagram story, and they were like, "Hey, I'm joining a soccer league, and we need like 6 people to join." And I played soccer as a kid and hadn't played in a long time, and I was like, you know what, I'll do this. Joined that, became friends with those people, and then we stopped for the pandemic. But then, just the league, because the league wasn't on, and we played soccer still every week, just us. And this week was our first time back in the league, and we went out there, and it was pouring rain, and there weren't nets because they were chained to the fence, so we had trash cans going, and we tied 1-1. It was nice to be back there with kicking a ball in the rain. So, yeah,
nice.
How about you, Emily?
I started watching this show called Severance. And it I gotta say, this show, I'm going to describe it as very scary. Like it's
horror Succession.
I mean, like, yeah, it's not.
That's how it's been pitched to me.
It's not really like Succession because, like, you're dealing more with, like, the, like, people who work in a company as opposed to people who own the company. But, like...
Shiv Roy works a lot.
Okay.
Don't disparage Shiv Roy on this
podcast. She works, but, like, she also does not have to work if she doesn't want to.
I'm being completely facetious.
Yeah.
As the Shiv Roy defender.
I mean, look, we are both human second and Shiv Roy defenders first, but
correct.
But no, like, I would say that there are scenes in this show that genuinely, like, I'm like gripping the edge of my seat, like almost crying with fear of what's about to happen. Like, it's really good, and there are character interactions that, like, the way that it is done is, like, it is obviously, like, it is supposed to be, like, a normal, like, nice interaction, but also there's, like, a very sinister undercurrent, and, like, I feel like I end every episode being like, ah!
Fair enough.
It's really
that's on my I kind of want to get around to watching
it is
that at some
honestly
point.
it is quite good.
Well, I guess we can wrap up the show there. I'm sort of taking the reins here because I'm going to introduce the book that we're going to do for our next episode 2 weeks from now.
Doomsday Clock.
We're going to do a double feature of Doomsday Clock and the Button crossover.
Who did it? Who did it?
No, we're definitely not doing that. Instead, we're going to be doing a very important comic another very important comic to the history of comic books, I think, but also something I've never read, which is Batman Gotham by Gaslight. And because it is so short, I'm going to propose that we also do the sequel, Batman Master of the Future. Combined, they are a total of like 120 pages.
I think
No
it is. I think it's a little longer than that, maybe. But I know that Comixology has a like collected edition of the two of them.
Oh, most of the collected editions collect both of them.
And I remember
together.
it being much shorter than either of the things that we have read so far. So
yes, which was part of my motivation in choosing.
Makes me very happy.
Having something that's a little. I mean, still, I think there's going to be a lot to dig into.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a. I don't want to talk too much about it, but it's the comic that broke Mike Mignola out. Like.
I had never heard of this before. You brought it up in the group chat, so I'm very excited.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Well, and then then the week after we can do like one solitary like Garfield.
Yeah, we're just one
loaf of Garfield.
1 3-panel Garfield comic. And then after that, to go even shorter, we'll do 1 Heathcliff panel.
Yeah! Get us some garbage
Garfield
up in here.
That's wow.
I don't think that's going to be exactly the schedule.
And then we'll do Batman from 1940 to present.
yeah. We'll bank episodes by doing like really short things, and then like we'll just spend a year reading every issue of Batman, and then record an episode on it.
And then inevitably, I'm gonna put it off, so I'm gonna be stuck reading 50 years of Batman in like 3 days.
You will have never. You'll just like you'll have like 4 devices, like just. You'll just be Ozymandias from the end, like with the TV screens, just reading every Batman comic simultaneously.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, no. So we'll be doing those 2 for the next episode, which will come out in 2 weeks, and then we'll announce what we're doing after that next week or next episode. So you can go ahead and pick that up and read along.
And if you would like to follow us on Twitter, you could do that at Crying Book Club. Jean-Luc, where can people find you on Twitter or the internet in general?
You can find me at Mountain Dew Liker. That's MT Dew Liker. And probably by the time this comes out, I'll still have the Kim Pine profile picture, so you'll be able to see that. And then you can, if you want to, look at star ratings of movies I've seen, you can follow me on Letterboxd. I'm JL Botbill over there.
And Alex, where can people find you on the internet?
Find me on Twitter at Alex Hansiuk. But ever since that Elon Musk bought it, I'm done. I'm done. God. Find me on Telegram. I don't know.
Oh, dude, I've got some sick Telegram channels.
No.
Actually, no. Let's just talk on WeChat. Find me on WeChat.
If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at mpandanata. I am also on Letterboxd at Panda Boar. It's like Panda Bear, but with an O instead of an E. You'll never guess where it is. I'm also on Twitch at Panda Boar. By the time you're listening to this, I am still probably every Monday streaming Ace Attorney games, and it is
based on how the last one went.
Fun.
Definitely still.
Objection.
Okay.
Games.
Fuck off. It only took me a really long time to get the first one, and then I did very well in...
You speed ran the rest of it.
I didn't speed run it. I just did it at a normal pace, and
It seemed like a speed run compared. Is that
Yeah, I just took like 10 minutes because for whatever reason, my brain was just not making connections, even though Jean-Luc got it a full 5 minutes before I did. Just watching it in the
I'm glad
audience.
you guys are both on this show.
But yeah, you can watch me play Ace Attorney on Twitch, and I also have podcasts. They are Imagine Me and Utana, the Fresh Podcast Market, and That Looks Terrible, which I don't know when the first episode of That Looks Terrible is going to be out, but hopefully it'll be out by the time one of these first episodes of this podcast is out.
But which one?
We'll find out.
Cool.
Well, we'll talk to y'all next week.
Bye.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah. Bye-bye. It's only one note.
I wrote a 5-page essay about.
Did you
Scott
actually?
Pilgrim.
Wow.
No.
I mean, I would have believed that you did that in college.
Yeah, I didn't do that in
I'll
college.
I'll save this for the show.
Instead, you did that about Riverdale.
I did do that about Riverdale. Yeah, a much higher form of art.
Of
some
course.
would say. So, some would advance that argument. I'm actually behind though. I need to catch up again. I watched the first 5 episodes of season 6, the ones that were out, and then the newest episodes I haven't seen. Yeah.
I have
not yet. Are you still in Rivervale?
No, I saw the last Rivervale episode,
Mhm.
the one
Okay.
where they do they get the comic book collection and
Yeah.
read all the
The-
comics.
the
I
Jughead
love that
parody.
episode. I actually love that so
No, I
much.
thought that episode was awesome.
Oh my god, you guys, okay, one, I know that we're not the comics podcast anymore, but we probably should do a Riverdale episode. But
Oh, yeah.
two,
Oh,
when the other Reggie showed up, I screamed.
Yeah, the original actor. Yeah,
I
so great.
screamed.
It was such a good, like, Riverdale is like aware of itself so nicely in
it
such
was
a nice,
good.
It was-
loving way. Oh,
Yeah, I loved
Poetic cinema.
that. Yeah, that was
All right.
Really
that
good.
was beautiful.
Okay, I can do our intro before we keep talking about Riverdale.
let's do it.
Yeah.